Very good morning, students. This is your class for economics, and as you can see, now we are going to start our second part of the book, that is Indian economic development. And in this, we are going to study the first chapter, and the name of the first chapter is Indian economy on the eve of independence. Indian economy on the eve of independence, that is in 1947. All right. So, as you all know that Britisher in India lasted for 2 centuries, almost 2 centuries. Till when? Till 15th August 1947. And on 15th August 1947, we got independence, and after that, we are running our country by ourselves. Okay? Indian economy become feeder economy for Britisher industrial base. Britishers have very good industrial base. They have modern industries, modern technologies at that time, and they were taking the raw material from our country, and thus our country was feeding their economy because Britishers were not allowing us to use our raw material to develop our industrial base, because the main motive of the Britishers was that to develop their own country and to destroy our economy. That was the main motive. So they were taking the raw material from our economy. Our economy was feeding their industrial base, and they were taking raw material from cheaper rate, and there they are producing the goods and selling them at higher rates. So when India got independence, then India inherited crippled economy in 1947. Now, what is crippled economy? Crippled is basically a handicap or a disabled economy that have nothing in it, that is totally destroyed, or we can say a disabled economy that have nothing in it for development. So at that time, the production sector that we have on the eve of independence, that is on 1947, can be divided into three parts. The first is primary, the second is secondary, and the third is tertiary. The primary sector is also known as agriculture sector, and that sector contributed to Indian national income in 1901. The contribution was 63.6% of total income, and when we come to 1947, it have been declined and it was 58.7%. Now what does this indicate? This indicate that our agriculture sector was not growing, but yes, still it was dominating. It was not growing firstly we have 63% approximately contribution, and now we have only 58% contribution. That means the contribution have declined. That is the thing, that our agriculture base was not much good. We don't have new technologies as well as a better irrigation system. That was shown in this table. The secondary sector, that is also known as the industrial sector. You all know what are industrial sector. Secondary sector basically takes the raw material from primary sector, that is based on agriculture, and then they made the finished products. That is secondary sector. That is why they are called industrial sector. And industrial sector was contributing 12.7% in 1901, but in 1947 it contributed 14.3%. That is a slight growth in the contribution, but still it was not very much good as compared to other countries, because whenever we talk about India is always available with cheaper amount of labor. Here the labor is very cheap, as well as we have enough of resources, natural resources with us. So our industrial development must be very much high, but that is not up to the mark. So that means we can say that industrial development was poor. The third sector, that is the tertiary sector, that provides services to help the primary and secondary sector. That's why it is also known as service sector. That sector contributed only 23.7% in 1901, and when come to 1947, there is a very little bit growth, that is 27% of the total national income, which is much better than of industrial sector. So we can say it was better than industrial sector. So these were the three sectors that were contributing to the national income at that time. Okay. Now what does we concluded from it? So the conclusion was that at the time of independence, that is in 1947, the most dominating sector was agriculture sector. Agriculture sector was dominating the whole of economy, because only agriculture sector, that is the primary sector, was contributing more than half of the income. And the income was generated by various type of agriculture activity, like various type of crops, and along with it forestries, fisheries, and mining, etc. was also there. All right. So these were some work by which we were generating about more than half of the national income. Okay, so that was a dominating sector. The second thing we concluded from it is the secondary sector on the eve of independence accounted for only 14.3% of national income, which indicate that our economic development in case of industrial sector was very much poor. That is indicating that we have a poor development in our industrial base. On the other hand, tertiary sector, which was not as much as primary sector but not as poor as secondary sector. So that was a moderate thing that we have contributed 27% from the tertiary sector, that is the service sector, which was a better condition thereof. But overall we can say that our economy at the time of independence was an unbalanced economy. Unbalanced economy. Because for a good economy, there must be a good industrial base that is supported by a number of services, and the agriculture dependence must be less. Okay, so that was not in our Indian economy at the time of independence, that is in 1947. Okay, so we can say that our economy was unbalanced at that time. And from this table we understood that primary sector is contributing the maximum and industry is contributing minimum. So we can say that we have backward economy or underdeveloped economy. Next is the occupational structure of Indian economy on the eve of independence. Now what does occupational structure mean? So basically occupational structure means that how much labor, how much workforce is engaged in one particular sector. Okay, so now we are going to study that how many person were doing work in primary sector, how many in secondary, and how many in tertiary sector. All right, so let's firstly talk about primary sector. So primary sector, in primary sector 72.1% people were engaged in it. Now this data is of 1951 because reliable data was not available for 1947. That's why we have a data of 1951. Okay. In this data, it is shown that 72.1% population was engaged in primary sector itself, out of which 50% was engaged in cultivation, various type of cultivation. There was 50%. That is a huge amount. That is half of India's population was doing cultivation. And 19.7% population was doing agriculture labor. That means they are working in someone else's field. They were doing work for someone else in agriculture. Else 2.4 was doing livestock, forestry and fisheries work. That shows that our agriculture sector is very much dominating at the time of independence. In ancient time as well as in modern time, our agriculture sector is the main sector. Our economy is agriculture based economy, so we can say that it is dominating. While talking about secondary sectors involve only 10.7% labor force. That is 10.7% population of the whole country was working in secondary or industrial sector. As we know that it was generating lower amount of income, that means lower amount of labor is engaged in it. So only 0.6% was in mining, 9% in manufacturing and 1.1% in construction. That shows that our infrastructure will not be good because only 1.1% is contributed there. Alright. Also mining was not good, so we will not have much amount of crude oil or other things like this. Or manufacturing, only 9% people were engaged in it. That means we are not manufacturing much of material. So how we are getting the material? We must be importing it. We must be dependent on someone. That means there was no growth in our industrial sector. We were dependent on someone else. By talking about the tertiary sector or the service sector, there was 17.2% population engaged in it. And out of that, 5.2% was in trade and commerce. That is, they are buying and selling goods and services. Look, only 9% is engaged in manufacturing, so there will be no much goods, so only 5.2% population was selling the goods. And transportation and storage was 1.4%, which was very poor. And other services were of 10.6%. That is a good thing, not very good, but a good thing, moderate thing. So we can say that the sector of service, that is tertiary sector, was slowly growing sector. All right. So our next topic is state of Indian economy during British rule. That when the Britishers were ruling India, how was our Indian economy? Okay, the condition at that time. So the first of all is low in economic growth of country. The economic growth of country was very much poor. It was less than 2% in a half of the century. That is, the starting of 20th century's growth was less than 2%. That is a very bad thing. And along with that, half percent of growth in per capita income during the first half century, the first half of 20th century. Okay, so that was a very poor condition of our Indian economy. The second point says agriculture sector. Agriculture sector uh, have the dependence of 85% of population. That means 85% population was dependent on agriculture. They are living by the way of agriculture products. Now, the agriculture shows low agriculture productivity because we don't have much of modern material, and along with that there were many reasons because of the productivity was low, like zamindari system was there because zamindar take off most of the production of from the farmer. Then there was no technology, there was no irrigation facility, neither there were fertilizer, and huge cost was involved in fertilization. Okay, so we don't have much productivity in that sector. Along with that, the second is commercialization of agriculture sector. Due to commercialization, what farmers were doing, they were growing more than what is required, and this more growth was then going to British countries. Along with that, farmers were given some advance cash. Why? Because they were forced to produce some particular type of crops like indigo. They were forced to grow indigo and such type of crops. The third is industrial sector. So our industrial sector is not developed because of colonial rule, British rule. Even countries world famous handicraft industry, that is Indian industry, declined because modern industry was competing with it. All right. There were many other reasons why our Indian industrial sector was not much developed, because Indian handicraft was discouraged by introducing new tariff policy. New tax rates were imposed on it, and that's why people were unable to produce the unable to sell the handicraft. That's why they stopped the production of handicraft. Along with that, they introduced low priced goods in front of handicraft goods. How were they low priced? Because they were machine made and involved less amount of labor. They were machine made and involved less amount of labor. That's why they were of low quality, low price. The British introduced such goods to dominate our handicraft industry. The third thing is, when Britisher came into India, they along with them took the culture of their into India, and the people were impressed by British culture. That's why they started to use British things that are made in British industry rather than Indian industry. Okay. Next we come to foreign trade. So in foreign trade we can say that basically India was exporting raw material to Britishers. And what Britishers do, they were converting this raw material into finished good and selling it to Indians. That is, India was importing finished goods. There was a complete monopoly of Britishers on import and export of India, because Indians were not free to buy and sell anything in the foreign countries. Next is demographic condition at that time. When we talk about demographic condition at that time, the birth rate means the total rate, or we can say the total birth in a year over 1000 population. 1000 people, how many people were birth? How many child were birth out of 1000 person in a single year? That is the comparison. So 48 per thousand was the birth rate, as well as death rate was 40 per thousand. 48% were born and 40 were died. That shows a poor health condition of us. Along with it, infant mortality rate, that means the child who are dying within 6 months of their birth, the rate was 218. That was very much high. That was very much high. 218 people were dying in that time. But in today's era, 24 per thousand is the infant mortality rate. So you can compare how much child were dying because of low quality healthcare system in India. The literacy rate at that time was only 16%. That is very much poor. Very much poor. Okay. Along with that, female literacy at that time was only 7%. That are the data taken from the Indian economy of 1947 or before 1947, because it was during the time of 19. Now, after that, the sixth point is the occupational structure. The occupational structure shows that there was a dominance of agriculture sector. Agriculture sector was the dominant sector, and it provided agriculture to almost 70. It provided occupation to almost 72% of the population. That was huge one. Along with that, the last point, that is the infrastructure of the country. So for that, roads were developed by Britishers, and the reason behind that was they have to export the raw material, they have to take away the raw material. Along with that, they have to take their army into our country, that so that we can't stand against them. Okay. The second point is railway. Yes, a good point, due to the Britisher rule, that they have introduced the railway system in 1950 in India. Okay. Along with that, so the air and water transport at that time was not satisfactory. Why was that not satisfactory? Because they were not involved in much development. Britishers were not concerned about developing the air and water transport. They were just doing the work as per their convenience. So if they are convenient in doing this work, they will do that. Otherwise, they are not going to do this work. So this was how our Indian economy was during the Britishers' rule. They were just exploiting our resources, they were just exploiting our people and doing nothing for the development of the country, as you can see here. Alright. So this is our last chapter in the topic. But this is not the least, because this is the most important chapter of the topic, and do listen to it very carefully. You have studied all this thing, and now this is just a conclusion part of the chapter, that how our economy was in 1947, particular year 1947, when we got independence. How was our economy? The first is the economy was poor and stagnant. A stagnant economy is one whose growth rate is very slow, and at the time of 1947, that is the first half of the 20th century, our growth rate, as we studied, was less than 2%. Was less than 2%. That means a very slow growth rate. So we can say that our economy was a stagnant economy. After that, we have a backward economy. Backward economy, we can say, because it was underdeveloped due to many reasons, like we have low productivity, there were no resources to use modern method in agriculture, so we were using traditional method of agriculture, and many others. The third is we get depleted or depreciated economy. Depreciated economy is the one in which there is no arrangement for replacement. Replacement of what? Replacement of fixed assets. Because our fixed assets were used by Britishers, so they were depreciated, and now they were not enough good so that we can use them. But we have no resources that we can replace them. Why? Because India was not making machinery at that time, and the machinery was imported from other countries. Now, if we have stopped the Britisher to send the material or to involve in our country, then from how or from where will we get this machinery? So we were not getting enough of machinery, and we don't have enough of capital so that we can purchase a machinery from any country. That's it. The fourth is disintegrated economy. Disintegrated economy means scattered economy, because Britishers have used the method or the policy of divide and rule. Due to this policy, they promoted discrimination between various groups on the basis of religion, culture, language, and some other things. By this, they divide and rule, and this policy happened or resulted into disintegrated economy in India in 1947. The next is semi-feudal economy. Semi-feudal economy, basically, when Britishers go from India, they close their particular thing from India, they give two systems to India, feudal system and capitalist system. Let's understand what is feudal system. Feudal system is a system of landlord and tenant relation. Zamindari system, you all know that what landlord did, landlord just gave their land on rent to the tenants. They will just grow crops on their land, and they will pay some taxes along with the half part of crop or some proportion of crop to the landlord, and they will be just left with very small amount of crop with their hands. So that was also a type of exploitation. The second was capitalist system. Capitalist system is the relation between capitalist and laborer. Here capitalist invests the money and the laborer is doing the all work. That means the hard work is of laborer, but laborer was receiving a very much smaller amount of salary for that. That was also type of exploitation. So yes, they just give us a type of exploitation in our economy. The next is agriculture sector was backward. Why was agriculture sector backward? Because look, 72% of population was engaged in agriculture and only 51% of income was generated from it. Why? Because we don't have enough of resources, we don't have enough of irrigation facilities, good quality seeds were not there, modern technologies were not there. So that's why agriculture sector was backward. Along with that, industrial sector was also backward because we don't have machinery. There were no efficient machinery with us. So along with that, handicraft sector was also failed due to Britishers, and Britishers have taken much resources from India that we have not enough resources now. Along with that, the last point, that less developed economic infrastructure. Now economic infrastructure is basically banking, insurance, transportation and some other services like that. But at the time of independence, that is 1947, these services were not much developed, and hence we can say that we have less developed economic infrastructure. I hope you get this concept of Indian economy, how it was previous to independence, how it was on independence, and how it is now. So the basic thing was that, and I hope you liked the video and understood all the concept. Have a very good day.